Welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict. Today we have a very special guest, and this is someone that we think that you will really enjoy because she is always ready to speak her mind. And she's always ready to bring the truth, despite it not always being convenient. Today we have Kim Iverson with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
You know, your reputation is you say what you think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for better or worse, right?
Better or worse.
In our opinion, it's for the better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, thank you.
Because if we viewed any number of your shows, we were forced to agree with practically everything you said.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great. Not a lot of people do. No, actually, I think a lot of people do. I just think that, you know, it's interesting because we have obviously the mainstream narratives that are out there that they push on us. And they make people believe that that is the consensus, that is the popular consensus. But in my experience, I found that, you know, when I go against that popular consensus, because I look at the facts and kind of assess everything and say, well, no, this is really what obviously is happening here, that the majority of people actually do agree with the facts and the reality. It's just we're being gaslit by the media to think that we're, you know, outliers in this way of thinking. But I've actually found that it's not the case. I actually think the majority of people are quite rational and can assess facts on their own.
Well, and we think that too. And I think that that's one of the things that our viewers on this show are really good at, because even a lot of the comments that we get are information from boots on the ground, from people who are living in these places that are saying the narrative from the mainstream media isn't what we're observing in our own lives. But what you're saying is what we're observing.
Right. And that's what I rely heavily on my sources on the ground all around the world. I mean, you just have to. If you can't make it there on your own, then you've got to rely on the people that are actually there. And I try to find as many sources as possible in those regions that are hot, you know, hot debate topics, because you want to get a variety of perspectives. And then as you get the variety of perspectives, you're able to kind of assess okay, you know, there's always truth in all of it a little bit, right? So you kind of have to go with what is the common theme you continue to hear over and over amongst all of them. Even those who don't agree with one another, they still have some commonality there. So that is always really important, I think.
You know, one of the things that the Chinese language does is it always sets context. And for our viewers, part of the context is who you are. And you know, you studied philosophy, you studied ethics. And how has this influenced you in your adult life as a broadcast journalist?
Yeah, you know, it's a funny degree to go get, right? Because it's like, what do you do with a philosophy degree? And I actually was intending on going to law school with it, which is why I did choose philosophy. I actually studied the majority of my time in college. I studied music. I was actually a music performance major for the majority of the time, and a philosophy minor. But then I ended up swapping them because I was going to have to go to school for one more year to finish my music degree. And I was just like, I can't do one more year of this. So I switched and studied just a little bit more philosophy in order to get my major in philosophy. But I do think that the degree, you know, studying philosophy forces your mind to think differently. And that is one thing that I really, really like about the program, is that, you know, you'll be assigned, okay, take a side on this particular issue. And you know, people, obviously the students will write on what they feel passionately about, and they can really argue the sides really, really well. And then the next assignment is, okay, now do the other side. Yeah. And so it just,
really, I get the logic of that.
Yeah. And so it forces you to think, how does another person possibly think of this? How does another person approach it? And it's really allowed me, I think, that training, those years of training, of doing that over and over and over and over again, I think it really did help me shape the way that I even approach a lot of these really contentious topics, to try to figure out, okay, what is the truth between the two? Because I can see both sides, and I really try to see both sides so that I really can truly understand.
You know, that shows in your broadcast as well. Now that you've said it, I recognize that is a theme that you actually succeed at over and over again. You present both sides, and you typically have one that you prefer.
Yeah, I try. Thank you. I do try to present both sides and see things from both sides. And a lot of times people, because they kind of hone in on my conclusion, maybe a side that I prefer, the side that I say, I think this is what's happening here. Sometimes people will hone in on that and they won't even hear what I have actually conceded for the other side.
Yeah.
But, you know, but I mean, I can't help people hear everything. All I can do is continue to present the information and hope that they understand, you know, that and then they can also come up with their own conclusion, which obviously people do.
Which is what our whole show is about. Come on, let's present the best we can, and you decide for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, so let's jump into that. One of the episodes that you did for The Hill recently, which you sent to us and was really, really informative. And it's a lot of the same things that have been sort of talked about on this show. So would you like to dive into Taiwan first?
Oh, let's dive into Taiwan.
Okay.
You know, one of the things in my background is I'm linguistically trained. I speak 4 languages.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which ones?
I speak Spanish, German, and Mandarin.
Oh, wow.
Mandarin's en route. It is the hardest of the bunch.
Of course, yeah. Especially if you don't have any, like for me, maybe it would be a little bit different just because I come from an Asian household.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a little bit of crossover there, but I could understand if you grew up and only were around Western languages, that it would be difficult to pick up an Eastern, you know, an Asian language.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that it really taught me is that in Mandarin, you always set the context. And in English, you don't.
So what do you mean?
For example, you're going to say, well, today, and at what time, and in what location, who, and then what's the action. So the person has a much better understanding of what you're talking about early in the sentence.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Like, do you have a more specific example?
Today is Friday. It's approximately 1:15, and we are talking with Kim Iverson.
Oh, I see. So in English, we would just say, oh, we're talking to Kim. But in Chinese, they would say, this is like
Context,
right. Got it. Okay. Interesting.
Then who and what.
Yeah. Very, very interesting.
All right. So let's dive into some of the linguistics with some of the news channels that have been pushing the Taiwan story.
Yeah.
And one of the things that from linguistics is a concept called distortion. And let me give you an example of some wonderful distortion. CBS News. Tensions are escalating between Taiwan and China as Beijing intensifies military aggression against the island. Now, is that a neutral statement?
I don't think so. Sounds pretty aggressive.
And we have lots of other examples. Matter of fact, the whole rhetoric around China is all this negativity, all this distortion, as opposed to reporting the facts.
Right.
Well, and so can you dive a little bit into what facts you do have about what happened recently with the airplanes over
the flyovers?
Right. Yeah. So the issue is, and like you mentioned, there's a lot of this rhetoric in the news saying that the Chinese is, you know, they're flying these planes over. They're kind of insinuating. Actually, some of them I think did say over Taiwan's airspace.
Yeah, I think they did.
And then they sort of backed down from that a little bit and said from their air defense zone, and they were being a little bit more accurate. But nonetheless, the average person doesn't know the difference between an air defense zone and airspace. So a person is thinking upon reading all of these headlines that, oh my gosh, China is being extremely aggressive. They're flexing their military muscles. They're going to invade Taiwan. They're going to capture Taiwan. They're going to annex Taiwan, whatever that is, right? And so, because look what they're doing. They're sending these, I think now, how many has it been? Like over 100 planes, over Taiwan. Like, look what they're doing. Well, the air defense zone is actually not an internationally recognized area. And it was drawn, the Taiwan's air defense zone was drawn up by the US military. And it's this giant rectangle that goes way beyond Taiwan. It actually goes over mainland China. So it's like, what? The Chinese can't fly planes in their own from city to city in China without that being inside of Taiwan's air defense zone. And so China when you look at the map, the overlays, they absolutely did not fly into Taiwan's airspace. They flew into this rectangular area that was arbitrarily drawn, that China doesn't recognize, that really much of the international community does not recognize. It's just a military drawn zone, by us, by the United States. So they flew and happened to be in this rectangular space. Now, the truth of it is that China has always flown planes into this zone. It's just that there have been more recently into this zone. So this wasn't, so there's a little bit, again, it's one of those stories where there's some truth in the middle, right? And that truth in the middle is, one, this is not Taiwan's airspace. But to Taiwan's, to their sort of what they're claiming, China is flying more planes into this zone than they had previously, but they've always flown planes into the zone. They've had to. It's basically, it's right off the shore of China.
Right.
So,
and in your opinion, I think it's because it happened right sort of as the news was breaking of US special ops in Taiwan and training.
Yeah. There's that, and then also the formation of AUKUS, which is the new NATO, right? So we've got NATO in Europe that was formed to counter Soviet expansion and Soviet influence, and now we've got AUKUS, which is meant to prevent China from their expansion into the Indo-Pacific. And so, of course, China, I think a lot of the planes being flown and the ramped up aggression from China, really this amped up display of military, is in response to AUKUS being formed. So AUKUS was formed, and then China started flying more and more planes out into the sea. But why? But you kind of have to look at that and say, well, what would you do? What would we do as the U.S. if China were to come out and say, by the way, Cuba, you guys are flying planes in Cuban airspace. But the Cuban airspace, the air defense zone, encompasses all of Florida, let's say. What would I think probably the U.S. would start flying a bunch of planes if China were to say, hey, we're forming a new alliance. That alliance includes Cuba. It's going to include Venezuela. And, if China were to make this sort of new, then that would be, I think the U.S. would absolutely respond with some, maybe even more than just flying some planes out in the ocean.
Absolutely.
The whole Taiwan issue has been very confusing because we only hear one side of it typically.
Yeah, and it is a very interesting.
And Cyrus Jensen and others that we've talked to said it isn't as clear cut as you would think.
Right.
Approximately 50% of the Taiwanese population wants to join mainland China yesterday.
I was just going to mention that it's 50-50. It's actually increased over time. So right now it's 50-50 that half the Taiwanese feel like, we're part of China. We want to be with China. But that number actually was higher further back. So it is getting to a point where more and more Taiwanese are wanting independence, but it's still not a majority. And, so it is a very, very complex situation. People do not know the history. They view Taiwan as like Japan, a completely separate country. Yeah. And they don't realize that it's never actually been that way for either group. Like they both claim to be China. We call them Taiwan, but they call themselves the Republic of China. And then you've got the People's Republic of China, right? They both think they're China. And it's just a matter of where the capital of China is.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they're disputing, right? The Taiwanese say, no, the capital's Taipei. And then mainland says, no, it's Beijing.
Yeah. Well, Cyrus gave us some information that was really quite shocking. He said 10% of the Taiwanese population either works in Shanghai or Beijing.
Yeah, they go back and forth.
They go back and forth.
Yeah. And that's a large percent of the population. That's not
large.
Nothing.
10%.
Yeah. They have a special
people.
They have a special passport because Taiwanese don't have their own because they're not recognized as a nation. They're part of China. So, that's like the international thinking. So they don't have an actual Taiwanese passport, but what they do end up getting for mainland China in order to go back and forth is like this special permit. And it actually says like, I don't know what the language is, but it's something like, a Chinese citizen in exile or something. And it allows them to go into mainland and travel around, and because they're considered Chinese by China.
One of the things we did was we took a look at the history of Tsai Ing-Wen, who's the president of Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, our interpretation anyway is she was on her way out power-wise. And she didn't have any issues to bring up for re-election, and she was losing in the polls pretty substantially. And then somebody suggested, well, how about Taiwan independence? Okay, that polarized a bunch of people, and they voted her back into office. And so she has a vested interest in keeping this conflict going so she can remain powerful in Taiwan. And going, wrong motivation.
Absolutely.
Well, war always, keeps people in office. I mean, that's not new, right?
We know it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not different than what's happening in the US, and that's what's happened in the US for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we know, and one of the things that we've heard you talk about, is sort of the push towards this war with China, or this idea of a war with China. And the idea of the war with China being used by the military industrial complex, because right now the war in Afghanistan is over.
Ish.
Over-ish.
Yeah.
And so the military industrial complex is looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
Is looking for the next thing to pump an enormous amount of money into. And I don't know that there is a larger enemy than China.
Yeah. And really, I think the reason they shut down Afghanistan was to focus on China. So it wasn't even just now we don't have a war, let's find a new one. I think they did that purposefully and said, look, we can move all of the conflicts in the Middle East to what they call over the horizon.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that.
Right.
Drone strikes, special ops, very small footprint. So you're not having large swaths of troops over there, but you're doing just small special ops forces over the horizon, drone attacks, right? So that is where they're moving everything in the Middle East. They're just like, we don't need to focus on them. And now they're obviously, with the formation of AUKUS and with this ramped up rhetoric against China, they're obviously focusing all of their attention now into the Indo-Pacific again, right? We already did this with Korea and Vietnam and the various different civil wars that were going on in Asia in the 50s, 60s, 70s. But we're back at it. It is this pivot towards China, this ramped up rhetoric. It would be extremely expensive. Look, we're never going to go to war with China. We're just never going to actually go to war.
The price is just way too high.
Too high.
What are we going to do? There's no way. We rely on them way too much for trade. We saw what happened during the pandemic when they shut down.
Where would we get most of the things that we use every day? Where would we in the US get the things we go buy?
Yeah, we wouldn't. And so we saw how the supply chain shut down during the pandemic. We couldn't even get toilet paper, right? There's a lot of stuff. We couldn't get masks. We couldn't get, there was a variety of things that come from China, and that really halted the supply chain. So just from that perspective, we're never going to go to war with China. It's really just going to be a Cold War, just like what we did with the USSR, and sort of similar to what we do with Russia. And this is very frightening to a lot of the people in Taiwan because Russia annexing Crimea, for example, is really sort of the future of what would potentially happen if China decided to go and annex Taipei. We're not going to go to war over it. We would possibly sanction, we would flex our muscles a little bit, but it would be a very similar thing, although Taiwan's more important to us for sure than Crimea because of the microchips and stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
But it would still, but again, just even if China were to annex Taiwan, it wouldn't halt the ability for us to get those things. We don't have any problem getting any other goods from China.
Right.
Only if we say, well, now we're at war, would we have a problem getting those goods? But we would still never have any issues getting any of the microchips or whatever we need out of Taiwan, we would get, even with China controlling them. So I don't see us ever going to war with China. Their population is 4 to 5 times our size.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're too important. They own too much. They own too much of our debts. We just would never do it. But it would be a definite. It's for political gain, right? Like to win elections. It's for the military industrial complex to gain more money. because they could say, oh, well, now we're not just fighting some Afghan fighters in the Afghan mountains that are super unsophisticated, right? We couldn't even defeat them.
We handed it right on back to them.
Yeah, we said, here you go, have more area than what you ever had before.
Yeah, and all of these weapons, that's really great.
Yeah.
You can have those too. Yeah.
Yeah, here you go. Have everything. So
one of the things is, go ahead.
It just would be very expensive going to war with China, because we would have to build much more, more expensive, much bigger equipment, nukes and subs and, all kinds of stuff. It would be, the whole ramping up of this rhetoric is doomed for the United States. Even if we never fire a bullet against the country, it's just expensive.
One of the things that's confused me is, why on earth did Japan say, you need to leave Taiwan alone, and by the way, we have an historical claim on it. Now we know that when the age of humiliation started around 1895, when China was being divided up by the European nations and Japan, that China was forced to give up Taiwan to the Empire of Japan. And so they had it for a short while, say 50 years, till I guess 1945, when the Japanese gave up a lot.
Right.
And now they say they've got a claim on it because once upon a time they owned it. I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Right. I mean, do they speak Japanese in Taiwan? Last I checked, I'm pretty sure they don't.
I hear Mandarin being spoken.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't make it. I mean, okay, then I guess Japan gets what? What else do they get? Philippines? Korea.
Oh, they get Korea too.
Yeah. So I mean, Japan had an entire empire. So I guess they can have their empire back. Is that what they're wanting?
Well, but so did the British. So I mean, a lot of people had empires. It's the way it's been.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a silly claim to make by Japan to say, "Oh no, that's ours," when they're obviously Chinese people speaking Chinese language with Chinese culture. But look, I personally believe, for any and all people, the right to self-determination. If they want to be free from whoever is that's controlling them and powerful, they should be free from that. But I think they need to assert that on their own, fight for it on their own. We potentially could step in to help if we see that there's like a real, potential win there for them. It's kind of like what the French did for us during the American Revolution against the Brits. Like, I'm all for that, I suppose. I'm not into useless, wasteful wars that are really, like this whole Afghanistan thing where it was like, oh, we're going to bring them democracy. We're going to save them from themselves. It's that sort of thing is, but, let's say Taiwan, if it does get to where the majority of the people in Taiwan, because like you said, it's a very complex situation. And same thing with Crimea, and Crimea was even worse. Like, no one in Crimea wanted to be a part of the Ukraine. Right. They all wanted to be with Russia. It was like 98% of them. And so they were happy when the Russians rolled in. They were like, thank God you guys are here. So, unless an area asserts and says, we definitely want to be, the vast majority of us want to be free from this, just like the colonies were against the Brits, that's when you could maybe make the justification of, okay, we're going to help them out by sending some military to help them fend off this, the whoever it is that's controlling them. But in Taiwan, it's not the overwhelming sentiment at this point. It might become that in the future, but right now it isn't. So that has to be taken into consideration. And the same thing for a lot of other areas of China, like the Xinjiang region, where there's a separatist movement going on there. Is it the majority? I don't think so. We see this with like the Kurds, right, in the Middle East. And it's like, as much as I sympathize with all of these groups that want to be separate, because it's really clear to me that obviously the Uyghurs are very different from the rest of China, right? They're not Chinese in that way. They have a different culture, a different language. So I sympathize and I say, hey man, more power to you. If you can make it happen, and if you can actually carve out your own space and say, this is ours, and we're going to fight for it, then more power to you. But if other people are living there and you're not in the majority, you're like 15% of the population wanting to do this and everybody else doesn't, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
If more than 50% of the population in Xinjiang province are ethnic Chinese,
right, that's the problem.
I mean, how can they possibly separate
Right.
When
And that's
half the population says, we don't want that.
right. And that's the issue with the Xinjiang region in particular, is that the majority of them are not separatists, and they're not
Right.
even Uyghurs, right, at this point anymore. And that whole area, people say, well, Uyghurs have been there forever and ever. And it's like, that's not actually true either. They came, they're Turkic people that came in, that area has been in flux for a long time with a variety of different groups along the trade routes. So it's never really belonged to any one group of people. It's always been an influx zone. But yeah, the majority of the people there are not separatists or even Uyghurs, and they don't want that. And so it is, how can you, like you said, how can you then carve it out and say, well, okay, now you're not going to live under China anymore, even though you're Chinese, you're going to live under us. We're going to separate this. I mean, so it's a very complex, and same with the Kurds. Like I say, more power to you. If you can carve out a space and make it work, but you got to fight for it. And the Kurds are actually quite good at fighting. So there is a possibility.
They might.
Yeah, they might. And if they get to that point and it's like really legitimate, maybe I wouldn't be super opposed to saying, okay, let's send in some help, but we didn't get the help from the French until the very last minute. I mean, we were fighting and separating and doing a really darn good job. And then it was the French that came in the last, in the 11th hour to save our skin. And that's kind of how it has to be.
Yeah. So the people who really want it are the people who are doing the bulk of the fighting for it.
They have to.
Instead of what it looks like is happening is manipulation from all sides. And this isn't the only situation that way, but having the people make that choice on their own, I absolutely agree.
Because they have to defend it. Once they've got it, we can't stay there forever helping them out. Like the French, where are they? They're not here.
Yeah.
They came in, they saved the day. They shook the hands of the, and said, okay, everybody get out of here. This isn't British anymore. This is American. And then the French left too. We've got it. So that's the only way that when these groups of people, when they want that separation, be it Taiwan, be it, the Kurds or the Uyghurs or whoever it might be, they've got to be able to fight for it on their own and nearly win. And they've then got to be able to defend it on their own when we're gone. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Changing the subject slightly.
Yeah.
Reading history, I came across some information about the rise and fall of empires. And even the big empires, 250 to 275 years was about it. And then the cycle everything would collapse and so on. And we're looking at about 270 years of the American empire.
Yeah, we're at the end.
Yeah.
We're at the end.
What I wanted to ask you about. What you thought?
Yeah, I mean, we're clearly at the end. I mean, we're kind of falling the same way other empires fall, which is kind of holding on with military might, right? Just doing whatever we can, scrambling and spending a ton of money on military and ultimately bankrupting the people. I mean, they're talking about this $3.5 trillion reconciliation package, right?
Yeah.
That is spent over the course of 10 years. That's not 1 year's worth of money. That's 10 years.
Yeah.
The military budget as it stands is like 3 times that amount over the course of 10 years.
Yeah.
And if we then start ramping up rhetoric against China, you can now double or triple even that amount.
Yeah.
Because we're going to need a lot more to flex military muscle against China.
Yeah.
So that's how you bankrupt a people. We're in a situation here in America where people are becoming more and more aggressive, right? People are getting more desperate, and that is making people more aggressive, right? And that's how, when you look at even just Latin America and those countries, and how the rich got richer and the poor kept getting poorer, and then the countries kind of implode a little bit, right? They become extremely unstable, and I think we're really at the brink of this if our leaders don't get it under control and do things that are going to help the average family live a middle-class life. If they cannot do that, then we will reel into more and more. You'll see more insurrections at the Capitol. You'll see more of the Black Lives Matter riots. You're going to see more of these, parents even just mad at the school board meetings, right? You're going to see this ramping up. And it's going to be over a variety of things because people are just going to let it out somewhere.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping, direct quote, "Our goal is to raise several hundred million people into moderate prosperity." And he seems to be doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
not he, the entire Chinese government is
Yeah.
doing it. Do you ever hear any American politicians talking like that?
I mean, they talk about it. You know, Bernie Sanders,
Sure.
right, definitely
okay.
talked about this.
And one.
Right. But but then you know, the rest aren't on board. And because the rest, you know, this is kind of, I guess, the benefit of being under like a, you know, a one sort of country, you know, one government like China, whatever you want to kind of classify that as, that they don't have democracy, right? So whatever the leader says is what ends up happening pretty quickly. So when he says, oh, we're going to, you know, invest all this money in this group, he doesn't have to go and consult, you know, 500 other people to get consensus out of them, like what we have to do here in this country. So they're able to rapidly advance in China, but at the cost of democracy. For me, it's not really, I like my democracy, so I don't personally feel the trade is worth it, but I see the benefit of not being in a democracy. I mean, I can appreciate the benefit. I just don't personally want it. Here you've got to get everybody on board, and you got one guy, Bernie Sanders, screaming about it, and everybody else being like, more war. That's what we need.
When we're in China, we talked to a number of Chinese people, and they had tremendous confidence and approved of the central government. The local governments, they had a lot of issues with because they were full of corruption and so on. And they said, no, you don't get it. We live in a democracy. Well, relative to where they came from, I believe they actually believe it.
I think that is an important point to make, is relative from where they came from.
But it's also, you know, and this is the hardest aspect for people to understand if they didn't grow up in an Asian environment, is that is just individuality and democracy is just, or I don't think in a family unit you'd call it democracy, but you know what I mean? Like individuality and the ability for the group to make a decision together is not at all a part of Asian culture for the most part. That is not appreciated. It's not propped up or advanced in any way. You do what is best for the group always. You always, you know, you do what is best for your family. You bring honor to your family, or you bring shame to your family. And that is a very real thing inside of Asian culture.
Yeah.
Asian shame is very real. If you shame your family in any way, that is it. Like, they will cut you off and they will disown you, and they will cry about it every day because you've brought shame to the family. It is a real thing. So it's not surprising to me that people in China or in other parts of Asia, like Vietnam, I still have half of my family in Vietnam, and I talk to them all the time. And it's just amazing the different attitudes they have versus what I have. I have a cousin, we're the 1 month apart in age. She grew up there, I grew up here. And it's like, just even the difference in the thinking about the pandemic was very different, right? Like, she was like, of course, you just do what your government says, you lock down, you do this, like, and she was all about that, right? Whereas me, being this independent person coming from America, I'm like, no way, I want my freedom, I want to choose. And she's like, there's no choices here. Like, why do you need choice? So there is a mentality that is very different. And that is really difficult, I think, for Western analysis when people start to analyze China. And they say, look, they have no freedom of speech. They have no freedom of religion. They have no freedom of anything. And they view that as a very negative thing. And they think, oh, the people feel really oppressed. The people don't necessarily feel oppressed by that. They feel empowered by it. A lot of them feel like this is how you succeed. You know, and in my Vietnamese side of the family, coming together, working together is a form of empowerment, not a form of, you know, it's not, it isn't, you know, destructive. It's empowering. It's the opposite.
You know, where we live, there are approximately 40,000 Chinese people. And because I'm so involved with Mandarin and these people that I associate with a lot, I've really come to appreciate the ancestors, the family, the pressures that you feel. And seeing people try to mix the cultures, they have a real hard time of it.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I'm half and half. I mean, I'm a walking, living, biological example of mixing the cultures. And it is difficult.
If you're mixing Buddhism with Catholicism.
Right. And that's what my family was, a Catholic on my dad's side and Buddhist on my mom's side. So I have mixed when I was a kid, my grandmother on my mom's side gave me a gold Buddha to wear on a chain. And so I'd wear this little gold Buddha. And then my dad's mom, my grandmother on my other side saw that and she's like, oh, no, 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 no. And so she got me a gold cross,
Yeah,
and I had to
God.
wear a gold cross and a Buddha on a
Mhm.
chain. As a kid, for years and years, I wore these two, you know, the gold cross and the Buddha. And everybody would say, well, you can't be both. And I'd be like, I'm both. I don't know what to tell you. I'm both. I don't know how not to be both. I'm both.
Well,
Well,
you know,
let's label it as enlightened,
yeah, I was going to say
because
that, you
those
know,
two
right now
perspectives.
that's a lot of sort of what's transpiring is sort of the combination of everything, and that everything isn't one or the other. And especially as we globalize, I think that's a very wise place to be.
I think it's also helped, you know, you mentioned my philosophy background, but I actually think what might have helped even more so was the fact that I had to grow up with this
Yeah.
split life. You know, one being Buddhist, one being Catholic, one speaking English, one speaking Vietnamese, one having a very, you know, on my dad's side, it was very be an individual, whatever you want to be. If you want to be creative, an artist, a musician, you know, I
Yeah.
was a musician, like I said, studying in college, and that was to
Yeah.
great shame for my mother. It was like, what are you doing? Why you study? Why not engineer? Why not engineer? Right. And so having that mixture and trying to, you know, it for on my mom's side, it wasn't just a generational issue. It was a cultural and language barrier as well for those of us that were born here, being raised by immigrant or refugee parents. And so just being forced to experience, understand both sides is, you know, and that was something like my dad's side would criticize my mom's side. They thought that they were, you know, that they were mean. A lot of that's kind of what the perception, I think, of a lot of Westerners is that Asians, because they tend to be colder and more rigorous and rigid, right? And just go study, don't play with your friends, no sleepovers, no birthday parties. Like we didn't, that wasn't really celebrated on my Vietnamese side.
Yeah.
You know, the whole idea of going to your friends for a sleepover was like, what? Who does that? Or a birthday party? Like you need a birthday party. You need, you know, a lot of the things that other kids had was like not at all a thing in the Vietnamese side. It was study, work hard, study some more. And, you know, maybe play violin or something to get a college scholarship.
That's really interesting. So I'm half Polish. My mother is Polish, and this is my father. He's American. And so, you know, growing up, we, my brother and I, we went to French school most of our lives. We didn't go to American school, and we went to Poland a lot. And, you know, Poland, when I was young, was not the place that it is right now.
Right.
And so, you know, because our family's all still there. So half of my family's in Poland and half of my family's in the United States. And so watching the circumstance that they were in was so wildly different than the circumstance that I came back to the United States and lived also.
Yeah.
And I think that having both cultures, you know, there's a lot that happens in the United States that people really scream about, right? That people think is this very, very big deal, and these issues that we think are the absolute worst. But there are very many people who are living in the world right now whose circumstance is so much worse than ours. And until you have that kind of mindset where you can look from somebody else's shoes and see that which you do, that they're just trying to live the best life that they can also.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the idea, you talk about freedom a lot, and that's where I think the idea of freedom really comes in, is that I can't tell someone else how to live.
Right.
Because I don't know what circumstances they live in.
Yeah. Yeah. We're very lucky to have, you know, first world problems here in the United States. Compared to other places in the world. And like you know, a lot of my family were left behind in Vietnam, and we were sending them money and hearing about their situation. And luckily now it's vastly improved. But for a long time there, it wasn't, before the US opened relations again with Vietnam and allowed them to have access to the global, you know, global trade and stuff. So yeah, I mean, there is a perspective that I think is kind of learned through having these traveling just and going to different places with different living standards. That in and of itself is huge.
Well, and I think one of the biggest, like, you know, you were talking about, you know, in Vietnam, you trust the government. And right now we're having an extremely hard time, even if that was the culture here, which it's not, even if it was, who do you trust in the government right now?
Yeah, we don't, you know, that's, That's one thing. That's why when it comes to a lot of things, I do look towards Scandinavia. I like
Yeah.
looking at them and seeing how they've handled a variety of different things. And it's, because they do have high levels of trust in their government, and they
Yeah.
don't have a lot of corruption in their government
I think
because of
that's
the way
the
it's
key,
set up.
right?
What's that?
I think that's a key, right?
Yeah.
People can see that there's corruption in our government. There's corruption in a lot of other governments. And, people are aware. We come from the position that people are actually very intelligent and are paying attention and have the capacity to handle the truth.
Yeah. Well, it's because our country and many other countries that have the same problem, the politicians are able to be bought off.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Very
we
much
have a
so.
system of legal bribery in this country with
Mhm.
campaign donations,
Yep.
lobbying, right? And it's all legal. And so we've allowed that to happen. We've allowed that inside of our election infrastructure. Whereas
Mhm.
you go to other countries, like even the UK has a lot less of that. And Scandinavia, they don't have that. And
Yeah.
so that in just the money, the bribery, whether it be legal or
Yep.
illegal, is causing
Follow
the
the money.
corruption. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So that's the problem.
Even though the taxes in most Scandinavian countries are outrageously high, you actually get something for your money.
Yeah. I mean, we're paying taxes, but what do we get? I mean,
Yeah.
especially here I am in LA, and I wonder every day, I pay so many taxes, and yet
Yeah.
I'm living amongst homeless. I've got
Massive amounts of homeless. Yeah.
it's become exponentially greater. And a lot of people think it's because of housing issues, but actually our homeless population's increased more because of drug use and mental illness, which is probably related, maybe, could be potentially related to other drug use of lots of pills that we would give people all the time for various different
for
things.
sure.
Well, which is another
Yeah.
structure where corruption is unfortunately
Right.
rampant.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And so the pharmaceutical industries, our medical system, unfortunately, is just built on that. How do we make more money?
Yeah.
And it's, we see it when we come out of our home and we're walking
Mhm.
around and we have to, and, and it's sad, it's terrible. And we're
Yeah.
just sitting here paying a boatload in taxes and wondering, what are we getting for it? I mean, we're still paying
Right.
student loans. We pay
Right.
in this household over $2,000 a month in student loan
Oh my
payments.
God. Oh my
It's
God.
horrible. I mean, it's like, that's why
Yeah.
we can't buy a house,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I
medical, we got to pay
understand.
for insurance, and then we got to pay for all these, and we have all these taxes, and we're not even getting those things for it. And we still
Yeah.
have to go outside and then donate money to somebody who's homeless.
Yeah.
We've recently been in 4 American cities, Seattle, San Diego, and Orlando, and here. And just as you observed, large areas of homeless people living in
Mhm.
tents.
Yeah.
In Seattle, they were living on hillsides.
Yeah. Seattle's really
Flat
bad.
place to lay down.
Yeah.
And a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. They've
Well,
taken over entire neighborhoods here, and it's,
Yeah.
it's just unconscionable that we have not put more money or done something about that. And I don't know what they're doing or trying to do or what they've attempted to do in order to correct that situation. But it is inhumane for us to allow people to, to live like this, to live in
Well,
squalor
Yeah.
and not be
$800 billion going to national defense.
right.
More
That
than
is
more than the next 20 nations
Yeah.
put together.
Yeah.
Well,
And we can't
the
invest
funds
in
are going.
helping people, kick their drug habit or kick their,
Right.
or mentally, if they're mentally unstable, getting into a safe space for them.
Right.
Right.
Kim,
Well-
is there any topic that you would really like our viewers to know?
I want to ask you a question first.
Okay.
All right. So, a lot of what we cover is a lot of, we see that there is this media rhetoric that's going on about China is bad. To hear all the bad things that are going on about China.
Oh, good.
And we do think that there is absolutely an agenda there, right? And the
Yes.
agenda is some version of war with China.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I would like to ask your opinion on is what are some of the biggest internal challenges that China has? There's a lot of power outages going on right now. I read that, shipping container costs dropped drastically recently, but it's not for a good reason, right? It's because there's fewer goods being shipped out of China. And so there are fewer goods coming into the US. And ultimately, that's a problem on its own. So what are some of the biggest internal struggles that you see with China?
With China, like some of the problems with China.
Yeah, that the government's actually facing.
Internal and external.
Yeah. Well, I mean, internally, I think they have a massive population. So they're dealing with just
Mhm.
they've got how do you manage 4.5 billion people or 1.4 billion? How many do they have? They
Yeah.
have 1.4
Yeah, 1.4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or to 1.5 billion people.
And
They've
that's
got a lot of
an
people.
astronomical amount of
Yeah,
people.
it's a lot of people. So they are clearly
Mhm.
doing, they've got a giant infrastructure issue with just dealing with the massive amount of people that they have. I mean, one thing that I do want to kind of say, I guess, about China is
Mhm.
there are a lot of problems with China. I don't
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't look at China and say, "Oh, they're the good guys." Oh, this is a good country and
Right.
there's nothing wrong. And I take an
Right.
issue, right? I take an issue with, and especially being somebody who's not Chinese. I mean, I've got like
Right.
4% when I did my little
Mhm.
DNA thing
Yeah,
or something,
right.
like
Yeah.
I think every Asian person is a little Chinese.
Right. Yeah.
But Vietnam has a big, the Vietnamese culture and Vietnamese people do not like China. So I'm not coming from a world viewpoint or even growing up with like this, oh, China. It's always my mom. I mean, one time I asked her if I brought home a man of a different race. I just wanted to test her, like
Yeah.
how,
Yeah.
what would she think if I brought home a guy with a different race? And she sat there and she thought about it and she goes, that's okay. Just don't bring home Chinese. I mean, that's kind of the sentiment a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
Asian countries have towards China. So if you talk, it's China's viewed as an aggressor. They're viewed as
Mhm.
there's a lot of history of invasion and takeovers from China.
Yeah,
Same thing with
that's true.
Japan being imperialistic, right? China's
Oh,
been very
yeah. Right.
imperialistic. So there is a lot of fear about China and Chinese expansion, and that is very real amongst the Asian countries and Asian people in general. But but the war rhetoric, the issue I take here in
Yeah.
the United States is that we ramp up and even make up a story in order to get people on both
Yeah.
sides of the aisle on board with, yeah, we need to we need to flex our military muscles and
Mhm.
counter China in a military way, which I don't think we need to be countering China militarily. I think we need to be
Yeah.
smarter because they're
Right.
smarter. They're not
Yeah.
playing that game.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's not going to work.
Yeah.
They're playing a whole different board game. Like I mentioned in my segment that you guys watched, they're playing a game of strategic go,
They
which is a
are.
Yes.
very
They
difficult
are.
game. And we're
Yeah.
sitting over here being like battleship, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
where are we gonna move our ships? And China's
Yeah.
already, they know, they are extremely intelligent. They know our strategy. They know
Mhm.
what we do. They've already figured that out and they're 10 steps ahead of us. So we've got to regroup and think about how are we going to counter the rising economic influence of China, because they're not going to go around and militarily grab these countries anymore. You know what they're
Mhm.
going to do? They're going to do it the way Germany's done it.
Yes.
So Germany is so
Yes.
smart,
Yes.
right? They
Yes.
tried World War I, they tried World War
Yeah.
II, and they said, okay, maybe we can't take over Italy or these other
Yeah.
countries via military, but we can own them,
Yeah.
Yes.
right? We can
Yes.
control them economically.
Absolutely.
And so Germany is like really now that the UK especially is no longer in the EU, it all
Mhm.
comes down to Germany, right?
Yeah.
Much to the chagrin of the other countries. But they'll say,
Yes.
well, I guess. And Germany will go around and they really kind of control a lot of the things over there. And so China is going to do that in a very similar way.
Yeah.
And we have to be smarter. And the way the United States does it is just going around making enemy after enemy after enemy,
Yeah.
while these other countries are going around making
Sanction
friends.
for you. Sanction for
Right.
you. We don't like what you
Battleship
do.
for you here.
Mhm.
Nuke over
Battleship.
here.
Uh-huh.
And so China, like I said, I don't want to live in China. I don't want to live under the Chinese
Mhm.
government. I do like freedom of religion. I like freedom of speech. In China, you do not have those things. So it is illegal to practice certain religions in China, and you will end up going to a
Yes.
prison if you do that.
Right.
Right? You cannot speak your mind freely in China. You might disappear for a while they re-educate you. They've done that,
Yeah, they're
right?
famous for
Yes.
that.
Right. And they do this. They do it to celebrities. They don't care how big you are. Didn't they just do that to Jack
Mhm.
Ma? They just made Jack Ma
Yeah.
disappear.
And
And they were like,
they just
you
kicked Jackie Chan real hard. He's really popular
Mhm.
worldwide and wealthy.
they don't care, the Chinese government, they don't care how famous you are. They don't care how popular you are, how rich you are. And they don't care if you're a Uyghur Muslim practicing a certain form of Islam that they don't like. And they don't care if you're Jack Ma making $1 bazillion with Alibaba. They will take you and stick you in a re-education center and they will say, you need to be reprogrammed.
Yeah.
I don't, that to me is something I definitely don't like, right? I don't, that to me is a beef to be had with China, but do we go to war over it? Do we
Right.
posture and say, do we then recategorize it and say, well, that's genocide, or that's, all of these very different inflammatory words we like to label.
Right.
They don't have freedom. That is true. A lot of them don't care, though. A lot of them say, yeah, I'm fine. I like it. I trust the government. My life is good. I'm doing what I need to do. And we're a growing country and rising. So this is good. I like it. But it's those that kind of say, well, maybe I want something a little different. China swoops in and says, no, you don't. That obviously that's a problem, a big problem for people. But again, so I guess I want to always strike that, because I always get accused of being, like a CCP plant or a.
We get it too.
Yeah, right. Or just being told, oh, you're a China apologist, or you think nothing's wrong with China. China's the good guys. No, I don't think that. I just know the culture. Being half Asian myself, I understand, I don't. Like, my white side of the family would always look at my Asian side and be like, oh my gosh, like they're so strict and they're so, there's a lot of things that they didn't appreciate about the culture. But I understand both cultures because I came from both. And I just say, just don't demonize, stay out of it. Let them manage themselves.
Yeah.
The people, if the people don't like it, they will rise up and they will say, I've had enough of this. Leave it to the people to do that.
Well,
and the Chinese are actually pretty good at rising up. I mean,
if they really don't.
Their history, boy, they're notorious for.
Right. Yeah, they will.
And I mean, even the Great Leap Forward really shows you.
Yeah. So they're not, the one thing I really take issue with too, with the US and the, kind of Western mentality is this, all of these sad little wimpy people all around the world, not just China, all these sad, they need our help, right? We're the heroes. We're smarter. We're stronger. We're better. And so we've got to rush in there and tell all those people what's really good for them. And that is like fundamentally so narcissistic.
Yeah, it's very arrogant.
Very arrogant. And so to think that the Chinese people, the 1.4 billion of them, can't like make a decision for themselves, and that they need the United States to come in and say, well, you're not given democracy and you're not given human rights of free speech and freedom of religion. So therefore you need us to come in and strong arm China into giving it to you.
And arguably, we're not getting that here either.
Right. I mean, that we could definitely go an entire hour or longer about whether or not we have democracy in the United States.
Right.
Well, that's a whole other show.
Right.
So I'm not sure that we're necessarily in the United States in a position to be telling anybody else how to run their country.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're definitely not, but we do it anyway, right? We're still. We think it's our right to go around and say, no, you need democracy and you need democracy and you and you and you. Everybody needs democracy.
It worked really well in Afghanistan. We did a great job there.
Yeah, right.
Is there anything that you'd like? Is there any parting comments that you'd like to leave for our viewers?
Let me think here. I think the big, when it comes to the world and how we approach all of these various different conflicts around the world, not just regarding China, but the Middle East and Latin America and everywhere. I think we do need to understand that every people and every nation is on their own track. It's like when you have a family of children, let's say you had 6 kids or something, you're going to have kids of different ages in those, right? And they're at different life stages. So you'll have one that's maybe in college, and you might have one that's just entering kindergarten and everything in between. And you can't treat the kindergartner with the same way that you're treating the person in college, right? Like you have to allow each place to evolve on its own. And it's really clear that even here in this country, we're I would say the United States is like in the teenage years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We're teenagers.
That's exactly what that feels like.
Yeah. And so we bully those that are kind of in those infancy years of just sort of, coming to, they just barely earned their freedom through a revolution or some sort. It's real recent, we're 270 years in, and they're maybe 5 years in or 10 years in or 20 or 30 years in. And we're kind of bullying them and saying, well, we don't like the choices you're making on this path of your evolution. And it's like, look, Scandinavia is not doing that to us. And they're in their adult stages, maybe even in their elderly stages, right? They might be the wise ones because they were like the old Vikings. They used to go around, and they got over that, right? A long time ago. They're like, we were Vikings. We were going around conquering everything. We did all that. You know, now here we are. We just want to be kind of like left alone and to each their own. So they're kind of in that older wisdom stage. And you don't see them flexing their muscles at us and saying, oh, you teenage brats in America, you guys don't, you know, you have a corrupt government that's bought off and you don't give your people healthcare and college and all these things that obviously, you know, we think you should give them or whatever it is. And you guys wage war all around the world. And we think diplomacy, you know, Sweden's like, they even have like an embassy in North Korea. So, you know, I think we have to take that perspective with all of these countries that we have to allow them to the ability to make their mistakes. We have to, without intervening, we have to allow them the ability to grow, to learn on their own. It's like cracking the chicken egg. You know, you can't do it. You have to let them do it themselves. And that's the issue we saw in Afghanistan, right? We went there and we said, you want democracy, you need democracy. And the people were like, sure, that sounds nice, but what is it?
Yeah.
You know, one of our guiding principles here is honoring the rights and dignity of all people. And we really devoted ourselves to that. And it sounds like you're pretty well along the same line.
Yeah, I try to. You know, I do think we have to, instead of demeaning and belittling, you know, understanding that we are all equal, even though even if we're in different stages of our development, and we're definitely not in a stage in our development in this country to be pointing the finger. Like imagine a teenager trying to raise younger people, or even telling the older adults what to do. And we are very much the teenagers in the world. We're like, we know the best. We know everything, and we're invincible too.
Kim, it has been absolutely a delight talking with you today.
Oh, this has been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
It truly is our pleasure. And I will continue to follow you on the Hill.
Well, so that's a great point. How can our viewers find you? Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all of it.
Okay, well, my Instagram, I'm locked out of my account and I have not been able to get Instagram to let me back in. I've been locked out since like April. It's the most ridiculous thing. And I keep saying, how do I get in? Because they have this like 2-factor authentication, but apparently I don't remember mine. And so they won't let me back in. And they keep saying, oh, take a picture of yourself holding up this sign with these. And I've done it 10 times and they still won't let me in. So it's like, I can't get into Instagram. But my Twitter is at Kim Iverson Show. I just got back on Twitter a month ago or 2 months ago. So that's pretty new.
And we follow you on Twitter. So if you guys want to look in our followed section, and when this releases, we will also have your, we'll tweet at you. So
okay, great. Perfect.
And then also see you there.
And then I do have my own YouTube channel called just Kim Iverson Show. So people can definitely go there. I haven't posted much lately because I've been very busy with the Hill, but I do intend to put more content out. So that's a good place to find me. My locals community is I'm there. I'm very active on locals. And also, of course, the Hill. I'm on the Hill Rising right now. I've backed off. I used to do it. Although this Monday I will be on the whole show. I'm hosting the show entirely on Monday, but normally I don't anymore because I have to wake up at 3 a.m. in order to host the Hills Rising. I've backed off. I've backed off, and now I only do a couple of segments a day for them so that I can wake up at a more reasonable hour of like 5:30 or 6.
Very reasonable.
Yeah, it's better than 3. Yeah, so that's how you can find me.
Great.
Do you have a Rumble? Do you have any other sort of?
Not yet. I've been wanting to get on Rumble because I know.
We have a Rumble.
Okay. Is it good? Do you like Rumble?
I like that I don't have to worry about what we say
on Rumble. Yeah.
I like that about it. Yeah.
So I do. I started a Rumble channel, but I haven't put any content up yet. So I've been meaning to kind of convert and move my stuff over to Rumble. So yeah, Rumble.
There are a lot of people on Rumble. I've seen a lot of people like share videos from Rumble. So, and we do have a Rumble, but yeah, it's sort of brand new for us too.
Yeah. And I'm on Rockfin now that I mention it too. Rockfin too. Rockfin. ROKFIN. Rockfin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know what that is, but I will check
it out. It's another platform. Yeah, you should look at it. Look at Rockfin. I can connect you if you want to get on Rockfin.
Yes, please.
Kim, thank you again. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
And for our viewers, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. Please like. It helps the algorithm out a lot. And as always, till next time,
stay informed.